Good evening and welcome to the October 1st, 2018 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. First item on our agenda tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to invite Beverly Kowalczyk to come lead us in the pledge. If everyone can please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Beth. Next item on our agenda is reflection. Late last week, we learned, much to our surprise, of the unfortunate passing of John Hudson, a longtime member of the city's Environmental Affairs Committee and a longtime activist in the East Deer Park neighborhood, someone who contributed a lot over a lot of years to the city of Gaithersburg. We learned that he passed in June, and we hadn't heard anything up until recently, just this past week. So I'd like to ask for a moment of silence as we think of John and his family. Thank you. Next, we have approval of minutes tonight. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve. The first would be from the regular session on Monday, August 20th. What is the pleasure of the council?
I'll move approval of the minutes from August 20th.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And we have a couple of abstentions. Okay. So those minutes pass 2-0 with 2 abstentions, council members Sales and Harris. Next, we have the minutes from the regular session on Tuesday, September 4th. What's the pleasure of the council?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 4-0. Next, we have the minutes from September 17th, regular session. What's the pleasure of the council?
I move approval of the minutes of the meeting of September 17th.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And
Abstain.
1 abstention. So that carries 3-0 with 1 abstention, Councilmember Wu. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to presentations, and I would like to invite Destiny Jefferson to join me at the podium.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. Okay. So, October's National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Gaithersburg's committed to supporting the prevention of domestic violence and assisting those in our community who directly and indirectly suffer from its devastating effects. The city is also committed to empowerment programs that support the positive educational and social development of youth to help combat the cyclical nature of domestic violence. The city supports 2 events in October to bring attention to this issue. The first is the 12th annual Restore the Joy Domestic Violence Awareness Luncheon, coordinated by Women Who Care Ministries, and that takes place this Saturday, October 6th. The event features a dialogue with a panel of experts, a resource fair, and inspirational presentations. Gaithersburg's Community Services Division is hosting an impactful training for area nonprofits on Thursday, October 11th, with a speaker from the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. Domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking are priority focus areas for training and program development within our Community Services Division for FY 2019. And so your input and ideas are welcome. And we have a proclamation, which I'm going to read, and then invite Destiny to say a few words. So this is a proclamation on behalf of the Mayor and City Council of Gaithersburg. Whereas domestic violence is an unspeakable offense against human dignity that shatters lives and families and can produce lifelong feelings of hopelessness and despair. And whereas the ramifications of domestic violence are significant, young women are among the most vulnerable, and children who experience domestic violence are at a higher risk for failure in school, emotional and substance use disorders, and are more likely to perpetuate the cycle of violence as adults. And whereas the city of Gaithersburg is committed to and supports important partnerships that have been formed with victim services, criminal and juvenile justice agencies, healthcare providers, allied professionals, and providers of positive youth development programs to assist victims and those exposed to domestic violence and to help break the cycle of abuse. Now, therefore, I, Judd Ashman, by the power vested in me as Mayor of Gaithersburg, do hereby proclaim October 2018 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month throughout the city of Gaithersburg, calling upon all residents to speak out against domestic violence and support local efforts to assist victims and their families in finding the help and healing they need. Proclaim this first day of October 2018, signed by me, and let's give Destiny and Judith, who's sitting over here, a round of applause for accepting.
Good evening. My name is Destiny Jefferson. I'm here on behalf of Women Who Care Ministries. We're here standing in the fight to end domestic violence that the proclamation that the city of Gaithersburg has put forward. We're very grateful for the long-standing relationship we have with you, and we continue to hope to fight domestic violence. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good timing.
Right on
Perfect.
time.
Okay. Hans, excellent.
Let's get the bike pin on.
Yes, yes. So we are very pleased this evening. We have this great timing here to welcome Montgomery County Council President Hans Riemer to Gaithersburg City Hall here. And Hans is going to give us some updates and tell us what's going on at the county, and we'll have a little dialogue too. So welcome, Hans.
Thank you, Mayor Ashman. I'm really excited to be here, and council members, really glad to be here. I have a presentation that I have on paper, and if I could email it to someone right now, it could go up, or I can work from the paper. But I apologize. We tried to get in touch, and we were a little late to do that.
If you want to email it to Doris, should it go to you?
No, if anything, they would put it upstairs.
Oh, really?
So Chris Clifford?
Yeah. Do you have
Okay.
a USB key if you want
Yeah, but it's on his
It's
phone.
on his phone.
Yeah, I
That
just have a
doesn't help.
link.
to. You can email it to me and
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So email it to Doris.
I'll. Do you want to go into something else?
Is it practical to be able to make it happen from a link, or should I just work from my paper?
Doris, can we get it on this computer over here?
Oh, yeah. You can't email it to that computer. That's.
No,
No, but he can go to a link and
Oh,
get
yeah,
and
if you
access it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Is it logged in?
No.
If it's on the internet, I can go to the link. Yeah.
We're getting so close.
Sorry.
It's not logged in. So this isn't on the
It's
internet?
just, no.
All right, I'm off to a great start here.
All right. Just tell us.
Hold
Sorry.
hold your phone up, we can post it later.
Just do the
Okay.
20th century instead of 20th.
All right, sorry, coming from Little League, and I want to thank you for your Lakeland's baseball complex where my kid will be playing on Wednesday night under the lights, and he's really looking forward to that, so
Excellent.
Awesome.
very cool. Well, I appreciate your making time for me on the agenda. It's really an honor to be here with you, and I'm Hans Riemer, President of the County Council. What I had today, and I will talk a little bit about, is some macro numbers or trends for the county. I'll make that brief, and then I would love to just engage in dialogue about any particular issues that you might like to talk about.
Sure.
So, the first slide that I would walk through is about the population trend in the county, which is really a steady growth that is a growth that has slowed down, but it is a steady upward trend in our population. Our annual population now is increasing at about 0.6% a year. So that is substantially less than it was, decades ago, where it was going up 5-10% a year. We have a much larger base, but now it grows more slowly in the aggregate. But of course, even then, it's still a fair number of people each year. So we are at about a 0.6% forecasted population growth at this time. Our housing supply is also growing more slowly than it used to. And we used to have, a typical annual addition to the housing supply of maybe 5,000 units a year. And that started to trend down in the early 2000s. And then after during the Great Recession, it kind of fell through the floor. There was a rebound subsequent, but now it seems to have kind of leveled off at a little bit below 2,500 units a year. So that is, that doesn't match the anticipated growth in the population in the county, and it is quite a bit less than our historic average of, the 20-year average is 3,500 units per year, and we're presently, our 10-year average is 2,500. The last few years have been quite a bit below, closer to 2,000. So we think we have an issue here where the annual housing supply is not growing the way you might think it would, given the growing population and the challenges that we have. And as a result of that, substantially of the housing supply issue, but many other issues as well. But housing affordability is becoming a real issue. And there's a big distinction I want to just dwell on for a second that came out in our recent rental housing study, which is that when you look at the percentage of households that are spending at least 35% of their household income on housing costs, which is kind of that's the level at which we consider that the beginning of being cost burdened. It's about 40% of renters who are cost burdened, and it's about 21% of owners who are cost burdened. So it's interesting to reflect on that because we often think about the issues with supply and demand in the housing market in terms of the production of single-family housing and the challenges that might happen with creating more subdivisions and things like that. But really, it's rental housing, I think, where you're seeing the bigger problem with affordability and with cost burden. And so the ability to create more rental housing, whether through multifamily construction or other types of construction, that's really where we have a big shift in the market, with more and more people renting and more of them being very seriously cost burdened. So that's just something to focus on. And in general, running out of space for new housing. That's kind of a big picture issue in the county. We've got 25% of the land in this county set aside, a little bit more in the agricultural reserve. 25% is set aside, or at least is subject to single-family detached zoning, is that housing type. 20% is parks. We've got a lot of right-of-way. We've got a lot of, once you narrow down the uses of available land, you are at a very, very small fraction of Montgomery County that is available to provide for the construction of housing, and for that, especially that multifamily renter housing. So that is a real challenge. How are we going to get to an annual production of thousands of units in addition to what we have now that might help change the equation to promote cost affordability? That study that we did a little while ago said that we would need about 30 to 50,000 more units to really move the needle on housing, on the cost burden ratio. So we are quite far behind on the amount of units we would need to have a big impact on the market, but we don't have a lot of space to do that. And it's a challenge to think about. So to many of us, we think that means that it's time to get creative, that we have to not only continue our emphasis on multifamily, but start to look at other types of housing that maybe historically weren't part of our general practice, or if they were in more limited ways. So one example of that is accessory dwelling units. And these are, historically common, but in many parts of the county over the last couple decades, the codes were changed to make it harder to do that, or make it, maybe not allowed to do that at all. But it's a type of housing that's getting a lot of momentum around the country in communities that have real housing challenges in a lot of single-family housing communities. So that's something we're starting to look at. And what we've realized is that, the underlying restrictions in our code are quite significant. And the ability of a homeowner to produce an accessory dwelling unit is quite limited. So we've been trying to address some of the appeals process, the sort of litigation process, for lack of a better word, but it's actually the underlying rules that are the bigger issue. So for example, you hear a lot about tiny homes. If you'd like to be able to put a tiny home on your property, you need to have at least a 1 acre parcel. And not a lot of people have 1 acre lot. So it's those kind of issues, restrictions around parking, restrictions around park proximity, that we have to look at. So we'll be tackling that, as well as duplexes. We allow duplexes in Montgomery County, but only if the second unit is an MPDU, which, as you can imagine, puts a pretty significant crimp on the economics of building a duplex if one of the 2 units is, in a price-controlled program. It's going to really remove that unit from being able to support the cost of construction. So duplexes are really not fully embraced in the county, and that's something we might want to take a look at. Our job growth numbers are positive, but they're slow. I think we created about 900 jobs in the past year, and okay, I have a statistic here. I'm not sure if the wording is correct on this, but the app-placed job growth is expected to be 158 per thousand between 2015 and 2045. So we're anticipating a slow, steady job growth, but our office vacancy is sort of an underlying issue. It's about average for the region, so maybe that's a little better than you might think, because we hear a lot about office vacancy as being a big problem. But when you look at where the vacancies are concentrated, it's very different today, and you know this story. It's very different today than it used to be. I have a chart here that shows in 1995, the Silver Spring Business District was the highest office vacancy rate in the county, and I-270 Montrose was one of the lowest. Today, I-270 Montrose is one of the highest, and the Silver Spring Business District is one of the lowest. It's sort of, the trends have inverted, as you well know. And so creating vibrant downtowns where companies want to locate, where workers want to live, that are transit served, that create that urban lifestyle, that urban quality of life, that is where the economic activity is increasingly happening. And so that is a challenge for us to be able to continue to expand that. And we're looking at, Bethesda is booming right now, but we want that spine of that city to go from really Friendship Heights all the way to Shady Grove, right? That's kind of the ultimate vision, is there's a spine right through the middle of Montgomery County that is a true city where companies can be and people can live, and the quality of life is competitive with any urban area in the region or in the country. Our income and tax base is growing faster than inflation, but so is poverty. So when you look over the last 14 years, the rate of inflation is 39%. Our per capita personal income has gone up 77%, so that's good. But the percent of residents below the poverty level has grown 44%. Certainly you're on top of these trends here in the city. Our resident employment has grown slowly. Our accessible tax base has nearly doubled in that time. So we have growing revenues. I think the challenge for the county council has been that all of the additional revenues, practically speaking, have had to go to set-aside programs for the future. And if we didn't have to add $100 million to OPEB every year, and if we weren't ramping up towards a 10% reserve, for our general operating reserve, we would have had a lot more. We would have a lot more money on an annual basis to devote to today's needs. But we've had the challenge of trying to meet those advanced funding requirements in a strained time, as you have as well. And so a huge amount of our new annual revenue every year is going to those programs that are setting aside money for the future. But Nevertheless, county spending is growing faster than population growth. So, we have to, I think, really take a close look at that. And so is debt service. I would say that the county is not in a crisis around debt service, but the trends are not sustainable either. And we have to do more to get our debt into line. We took some steps this year in the capital budget. For the first time in several years, we had a significant reduction in our annual borrowing and our projected borrowing for the window of the capital budget. But we didn't take it down far enough. So this is going to be something that's going to be, it's going to be in your lap too to some extent, because it's schools that aren't necessarily, we've been able to continue to increase the amount of funding for schools even though we've decreased the overall size of the capital budget. But it's something to keep an eye on. But it's schools and it's transportation and it's parks and it's libraries and community centers and everything that our constituents want. So we have not reduced our capital budget enough to get to the benchmarks that we should be at for affordability. So this is going to be a challenge for us in the next couple of years, is to not only hold the line on the fairly tough decision that we outlined this year at the beginning for our 6-year borrowing, but to even reduce it further. So those are some factoids, or some facts. I apologize again about my inability to get you the presentation in a timely manner, but I would be delighted to engage on any of these issues or other issues that you might like to talk about, and thank you for having me before you tonight.
Thanks, Hans. We appreciate it, and it works just fine.
Good.
We didn't necessarily need slides for this.
Okay.
It worked just fine.
Well, I set myself up for that expectation. So.
What are you guys doing about small cell?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. We actually passed out of committee today at the Fed committee, recommended to the full council our new small cell ordinance. And this ordinance is the second part of what was really a two-part approach to the challenge of zoning for small cells. And the first part, as you know, we zoned all the commercial areas in the county, but we didn't do the residential, to come back to that and to give that more careful thought. The recommendation we got from the county executive for residential areas, it's quite simple in its basic structure, which is in neighborhoods with underground utilities, it will remain a conditional use. So the companies will not have the right to just go in there and put the antennas up because there's no poles to put them on. So when they have to install a new pole, they're going to have to go through the conditional use process, which involves the county getting to examine the request and to negotiate a bit. So,
are you guys going to have public hearings each time?
Yes, a conditional use has a public hearing each time. Now, I would also say that that is for the neighborhoods with underground utilities.
Yes.
For the rest of the county, we have a very, I think, direct and very clear ordinance that the basic idea is if 30 feet is the minimum, as close as you can get to a house. So as long as you can go on an existing telephone pole, utility pole, or street light, as long as it's not closer than 30 feet, you can go. In the neighborhoods that have underground utilities, 30 feet will also be as close as they can get to a house, but they would still have to go through a hearing in order to be able to install that new pole. Now, as you know, the FCC acted last week, and their orders would take away a lot of our authority over this, and I hope we'll sue them. We're talking about that. We're going to join with other governments, and the city might wish to be a partner in that as well. But it is certainly my belief, and it's the belief of many of us, that if we're going to prevail in court, it's because we are able to demonstrate to the court that the federal action is arbitrary. And in order to demonstrate that the federal action is arbitrary, we have to show that our local actions are sufficient. And so we have to have an ordinance to rely upon that we can say to the court, they didn't have to do that. That was totally unnecessary. So there's some urgency with our passing the ordinance, even though, the FCC is taking preemptive action the state is looking at preemptive action. There's no easy way out on this one. There's no easy path. We feel like that we have to enact an ordinance, and we've got to follow through on that. So we're facing that threat of FCC preemption as well as state legislative preemption, and we're working together to fight that out in the state. And I know that MML has been a leader there, joining us and saying, we can do this. You don't have to take away our authority. You shouldn't take away our authority. But as far as the concern of whether small cells can actually be deployed, we will resolve that issue satisfactorily. So that's the current state. So it has been recommended out of the committee, and it will be before the council. We have to pass it before the end of October for our own zoning timeline. So if we don't pass it by the end of October, the council can't do any zoning changes after that because of our, we have a moratorium on council zoning actions. And then it would actually expire before the new council seat is seated. So if we don't act on it in October, we're going to have to reintroduce a new ordinance in January and then go back into public hearings and go through that whole process all over again. So I'm hopeful that we'll pass. I think we have a good formula, but I'd love to hear your feedback on it. And I appreciate the role that you have, because many of the communities that have been so focused have been in Gaithersburg, and so it's a bigger share of your community than it is of the whole county. So
we know we've had some dramatic public hearings in here where I swear people wanted to have our heads on pikes.
Yeah.
But we've come a long way, and we're represented very well by our city attorney and outside counsel on this, and I feel like we've been sort of on the cutting edge with regulating it, and we're keeping a close eye on the FCC,
Yeah.
and as well as the state, and so
we know what they want. They want the industry to be able to have unfettered access
Yes.
to our right-of-way or our property and not have to pay for it. And that's what they would like, and they're going to get as close to that as they possibly can. And we have to push back on that as aggressively as we can.
yeah. I'll open it up to the council. Rob?
I just wanted to follow up on that, and then I've got some other questions or topics. First off, Hans, thank you for coming here tonight and your presentation. Even though it didn't have the slides, it was still very informative, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilman.
So following up on the topic the mayor was just discussing on the cell towers, I recall when the Councilmember Florine introduced the ZTA, I think it was 2 years ago or a year and a half now, the big concern was about the lack of due process, the removal of the hearings requirements when you're going for the conditional use permit. So I haven't quite followed it going forward. So was that changed in the current process?
Right. 2 years ago, Councilmember Florine introduced a zoning change that, as you said, made it a limited use or by right, installation pretty much everywhere, including in neighborhoods that don't have utility poles. So the ordinance that we now have, which I think really has the benefit of not only more community input, but also more careful thinking about how many of these are we really going to need, and what is the line between when you are putting up a barrier to deployment that's going to be hard to fight for, and it's going to be hard to defend in court, and one that is kind of within the, it's workable. And so, we've looked carefully at the maps. We now have a map of the county that shows where every street light is, so we know how far they are from their buildings. That's all on our county's GIS page. So we've been able to determine that maintaining the hearings for communities that have underground utilities is still going to be workable, that the companies will still be able to effectively get enough poles out of that process to have a deployment, but even with the negotiation that will happen. So, and it could be that through that we can push some of those off to the main arterials, and we can have an impact on what type of deployment we get. But we have maintained the hearings for those communities that I think are most challenged.
Okay. And I appreciate that, because as you might know, a lot of the deployments are in North Potomac and in Germantown surrounding our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And then you've got some of those major arterials coming through our jurisdiction where there's the possibility of these being installed. So I'm encouraged by that, and I'd commend to the county council as they take this up to continue along the path of community engagement and deciding how and where these are appropriately sited. I guess I'll shift gears to a topic that was not addressed, but what I've been talking to Councilmember Katz about recently, the issue that he's been taking of tax duplication.
Sure.
He had mentioned that he was chairing a committee that was looking at the issue and had been progressing. I was wondering if you had any thoughts or opinions on equitable distribution of resources to the municipalities within the county.
Yeah, sure. This is an issue I've worked on myself in my years at the council, and it's an ongoing conversation. I'm not aware of a task force. That's a sort of a specific word, so it could be Councilmember Katz is leading such a thing. I didn't know about that, but I know that there's been a lot of conversations about it. From the council's perspective, it is the executive branch that negotiates the tax duplication formulas, and the council is in the position of approving a negotiated MOU or, a negotiated agreement. There hasn't been a negotiated agreement, a new one, in many years, so the old one is still operative. I think that taxpayers who pay for a service in the city of Gaithersburg shouldn't have to pay for that additionally through the county. I also think that from the county's perspective, we want to also focus on tax duplication. We got a letter recently from MML saying that we ought to pay the full cost of service, not just the tax duplicated cost of that service. So we're sending a letter back, to observe that it's the tax duplicated portion of a service that we think is the appropriate amount for us to pay. I guess what I want to say broadly is, this is an issue that every time the mix of services in the county changes, then the fiscal net is going to change because the puts and takes change. So there isn't going to be a time when we do something that's going to last forever. Every year your budget changes, the services that you provide change, and so the services that you think might be subject to duplication change. So it has to be an ongoing conversation. But we will see where the new county executive, and if the new county executive wants to prioritize negotiating with the municipalities, that would be the best course of action, I think, for the county executive and municipalities to come to an agreement and then to send that to the county council for funding through the budget.
I appreciate that. I have two other points. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
I know Ryan's not here, so maybe we all have a little more time to ask questions.
Just make them quick.
Okay, so recently you've been following the issue of school funding, and I guess there was an unanticipated shortfall in the county's budget recently to the tune of, I think, $80 million.
A little more.
Okay,
Yeah.
more. And that there was some discussion about that impact on funding being provided by the county to the schools. So that's a major issue everywhere in the county, but in Gaithersburg we have a large need just as everyone else does. So I'd like you to talk about your vision, or maybe what you see as the county's vision going forward to meeting the funding requirements that I think we all know we need to educate our children.
Yeah. Well, certainly in my time at the council, and I think for many other council members, funding MCPS has been priority number one. And we have put our money where our mouth is in a pretty substantial way. We've gone, just as one way of illustrating that, we've gone above what the maintenance of effort requirement would stipulate in our budgets for several years in a row now. This year, we funded the superintendent's budget request at, I think, about 100%, actually a little over 100%. So I don't think the schools can, have anything to complain about there. the last 3 years, we've been at about 100% of the superintendent's request in each year. So while we did have a savings plan in fiscal year 18, and the schools did contribute to that savings plan, in general, it seemed like it was something that they were able to kind of absorb within their normal day-to-day operations. They typically end the year with about $20 million unspent. You know, that's their fund balance kind of. And they contributed about $25 million overall to the savings plan. So it didn't seem like it was that much for them to kind of absorb that. You know, my vision overall is that the work that we do to give kids opportunity is the most important work that we do, and we have to continue to fund that. We're looking to expand beyond what the schools, you know, we're working with the schools to expand their commitment to early childhood education. And of course, you know, we spend in the county, we've tallied about $250 million a year to support the schools through services such as healthcare. You know, we pay for health services on a school property, but we don't bill that to the school system. We pay for it out of our HHS budget. So we're funding not only the MCPS budget, but we're funding substantially above that to support the work of the schools. But we do have to all keep really focused, and this will be an important opportunity for us to work together on what is going to happen in the state. And there's a lot of conversation through the Kerwin Commission about changing funding formulas for the schools. And you know, it's hard to predict where that could go. But certainly funding schools has been top of the list for us. So.
And a final question relates to that pin you're wearing there. So I recently took a bike ride from the National Zoo up to Gaithersburg, where I live, to my house. And you know, it's a bucolic ride up through DC and into Bethesda and up to Rockville. Rockville's got this nice millennial trail. But as it enters county space, it gets a little dicey between Rockville and Gaithersburg.
Mm-hmm.
And then between the county space and Gaithersburg, it gets very difficult. The paths stop and they don't exactly meet up, and you have to do some interesting navigating. 2 years ago, myself and council member Polakovic Carr from Rockville, as well as the bicycle folks for the county, met to have a joint meeting on interjurisdictional planning for bicycle paths.
Nice.
We had a good conversation about making sure that there's connectivity between jurisdictions, some good follow-up afterwards, but then it kind of just went away.
Okay.
Wanted to get your thoughts on something like that going forward, where we can make sure that, you know, as county space enters Rockville space, as Rockville space enters county space, and then Gaithersburg space, and, you know, various other cross jurisdictions, that we look at making sure that the paths meet up, make sure that we're building out a network concurrently and in cooperation.
That's terrific. I think that's an important area for us to work on together. I've done the kind of the reverse of that ride from Germantown to Tacoma Park, and I found that Gaithersburg, especially where like along some of the larger arterials where you have separated paths, the quality of the bike infrastructure was so nice. And when I got into downtown Bethesda, it was really, really bad. And like the worst part of my ride from Germantown to Tacoma Park was Bethesda. I think the county has really been behind, and a lot of those parts of the county just weren't planned out for bike infrastructure the way that some of the newer communities were. So there's just not, I can see how connections would be poor in between on county land. So we are taking up the bicycle master plan right now. It's before our T&E committee, and it'll be coming to the full council this month in October. And I think it'd be worth kind of checking in on what recommendations might have been made for those connection points. And, you know, perhaps there's an opportunity to kind of elevate the priority of some spending that would address some of those connection points and give that long distance commuter or recreational rider, you know, a better trip. I'm always amazed by the number of people who, I meet people in Sandy Spring who commute into DC. You know, it's people.
It's quite the ride.
It's quite the ride. I you know, that's a lot, but people do it, and I think we have to. So I'll make a note of that, and it would be happy to circle back with you on that.
Great, thank you for your time.
All right, I'm going to sort of move down the line, but just request to our council members, just keep it to one or two questions, just because we have a full agenda here too. Go ahead, Mike.
So, Councilmember Wu actually asked the two questions that I was most interested in, was the small cell issue. You and I have talked about this before, and the tax duplication issue. So, I guess, the other issue that actually has an impact on many businesses, retail establishments in Gaithersburg and the entire county, is the issue of the Department of Liquor Control and the impact of that, and whether or not this whole discussion of whether the county should really be in the liquor sales business.
Right.
What are the advantages and disadvantages of that, and if it's a must, then why can't it be more profitable, and why can't it be a better service for those businesses that use it, and for the people that use the stores as well. So
Right.
Maybe you want to comment on that. So.
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. As you'll remember, I think it was 2 years ago, it might have been 3, I had proposed that we partially privatize the warehouse. And so, we have a big warehouse in Gaithersburg.
Yeah.
Greatest place to have a warehouse, of course, where every bottle, other than those made at a local brewery, every bottle goes through that warehouse. And every bottle, every can. And it can only stock so many products. So what I proposed was that if the county warehouse can't stock a product, then the restaurant or the store should be able to order that from the private sector. And that was kind of a way of, providing the biggest value, I thought, for privatization, where it was a kind of a clearer need, but by keeping it more targeted, the fiscal impact was more modest to the county. It was probably $4 or $5 million, maybe something like that, of lost profit revenue from the sale. Unfortunately, the story. I guess from my point of view, the folks who said we should just get rid of the whole thing kind of trampled all over the fairly carefully aligned proposal that I had. And if you get rid of the whole thing, it does have a significant fiscal impact on the county. There's no question about it. It's $30+ million and $100 million out of the capital budget. That you have to reorder the capital budget to pay for what the liquor revenue is paying for out of the general revenues. And I think a lot of people would really have a second look at whether they're willing to delay a high school. For example, I think we have Crown on the books at some point, right? Is it so important to privatize that we ought to delay a high school's opening by 5 years? It's not a small issue. And unfortunately, the state has never come up with any solution for us. If the state were to say, we'll make you whole with sales tax from alcohol, or we'll give you $50 million in capital spending to kind of make up for that, it could help us. But it is kind of a rock and a hard place as far as mitigating the fiscal impact, which is why I had tried to focus our effort on areas where I thought there were legitimate problems getting niche products, and the cost of the county was one that we could, I thought, more readily absorb. Having been unsuccessful in that effort, I turned my effort to local production of alcohol, breweries, wineries, distilleries, cideries. And I've been able to, I think, move the needle in a lot of ways on that issue. And in fact, we have a vote tomorrow at the council on the ag reserve and whether we'll allow wineries and breweries and cideries and distilleries to really thrive in the ag reserve. And I think we ought to come back to this question of whether grocery stores can sell beer and wine. That doesn't have any impact on the county whatsoever. And I think when you look at it from a consumer perspective, that's really the most egregious thing. I experienced it this weekend. I had a party at my house, and I needed to get some soda and some beer and some ice, and I had to go to 3 different stores, and it was ridiculous. So I would urge us to continue to monitor customer satisfaction for stores and restaurants with the county, and as a result of the outcry and the pressure that we brought to bear, the entire leadership of the DLC was thrown out, and new leadership was brought in. That leadership has actual industry experience. What I hear is that people are much more satisfied than they were, and that they're getting better service than they were. But we have to monitor that constantly. And if that changes, then we have to, if we can't be a good partner, then no money in the world can justify being in that business. But if we have people who can manage it, maybe it can work. But in the meantime, let's focus on allowing beer and wine to be sold in grocery stores so that our residents can, have more convenient lives, I guess. That's my own personal reaction to.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll let,
Neil?
Neil.
So, hello, Hans. Thanks for coming out, and thanks for all the great information and insights that you're sharing with us today. One quick question and then one slightly less quick one. On the housing growth statistics that you gave us, is that based on the zoning and permits for the county alone, or does it include the municipalities?
Probably does not include the municipalities. That would be my guess.
All right, just curious, because I've seen a fair amount of housing growth in our neighbors in Rockville, and we've got Crown coming online, so.
All right.
And we've got a number of companies that have come to us to talk about potential multifamily here.
There's a lot of great housing going up, and you can see the housing types that are really being pioneered here, I think. It's nice.
Yeah, and I know you've been keeping your eye on the ball for transportation issues and keeping things moving. So hopefully we can get something going on transit. I thought it was interesting that you talked about the spine of the county and you stopped at Shady Grove, which is where the end of the red line is.
I didn't want to be presumptive, so if you wanted to go further, we can keep going.
We can keep.
Well, you're already going through Rockville. That's one.
If you can get some higher powered transit coming up this way, I think we'd be appreciative if that's in any way feasible. The CCT has been kind of taken off the drawing board for some period of time, so something like that would be very helpful. So speaking of transportation, I've had a number of residents talk to me about the condition of the roadways in the county. There seems to be, I've heard, I haven't actually seen the information, but I heard that there was some funding issue relating to road maintenance in the county roads this last year. Is that correct? Because it seems like the state roads, and I know the city roads are being, we had the summer season where road maintenance typically goes on, but there's a lot of county roads that seem like they could use a little work. Are you aware of that? Is that something that's going on right now?
I am not aware of any problem that would have resulted in our underspending, or we certainly didn't reduce the budget for resurfacing. We've been trying to increase that steadily. We've added money over the executive's recommendation at the council for the last couple of years for road resurfacing. I'm not aware of a particular glitch in the system this year, but it is a constant issue. I mean, it's as soon as you do it, the cars are on the road and the deterioration begins. So we are behind what we know we would want to spend if we wanted all the roads to be smooth. We would spend a substantial greater amount of money than we do. The same with sidewalk maintenance and other types of transportation infrastructure maintenance. So it's been an area where we've had to, in the context of a constrained capital budget, it's been kind of a challenge. But I think I'll take note of. I'm hearing what you're saying, and I will, Yeah,
I was just curious because, like I said, there's been a number of residents have come to me, and I had heard from somewhere that there was some issue on the state of good repair budget, but I wasn't really aware of that discussion.
I know that we weren't able to fully fund what the Transportation Committee had proposed for resurfacing, but what they proposed was a very large increase over what the executive recommended, and we were able to increase the funding over what the executive recommended, but we weren't able to do 100% of what the committee had recommended in our capital budget this year.
All right, understood.
And as far as the transit components, if I could answer on those, I think that I'm very disappointed about the CCT being removed from the capital budget at the state level. I think we got to fight to get that back in, and we need to be looking at public-private partnerships to get that built. I think having a tax district, is really an option that we've got to get kind of open about and talking about, seeing if that could work for a good share of the funding. And I think we ought to be moving as quickly as we can on the Route 355 North. I think that is, very doable, very attainable. We've got the great limited stop service that we started from Lake Forest Mall down to Medical Center, but we could do a lot more. I think that that I think either the CCT or 355 North, whichever one we can get done fastest, should really be the next significant transit investment for the Up-County. I would like to initiate some thought into extending Metro north or adding more stations on the Red Line. I think we ought to, think big picture about Metro itself. And as far as bus transit is concerned, Metro has this now dedicated funding source, which is supposed to go for capital expenses, and bus service is part of that. So one of the conversations we're going to have at the council soon is to try to hone in on, and I think this would be a great place for us again to work together. What do we want Metro to be doing to really take a big step forward in the quality of their bus service? Because some of that money that we're paying in every year now should go to that as well. So maybe that could become part of the 355 North, or there might be other options there. So there's a lot to get going on in the next couple of years.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Lorianne.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council President. How are
Good
you?
evening, Councilwoman. I'm great, thank you.
Thank you for coming up county to update us on the status of the county. So I had some questions that kind of overlapped from my colleagues. So the first question, you mentioned the office vacancy and job growth, but I don't think I heard the office vacancy numbers.
Yeah.
And another question about repurposing these old office buildings for school usage. I don't know if you have any updates on that.
Sure.
Especially since Gaithersburg is home to the most overcrowded school in the county. It's important to keep our eyes on vacant buildings and see what the county and other jurisdictions are doing for repurposing them.
Do you want me to start responding and then?
Sure, go
All
ahead,
right.
and I'll ask the other questions.
Well, I have a slide that talks about office vacancy and how it's more concentrated now in suburban locations. Today's most vacant area is the I-270 Montrose area, and I wish I could tell you the exact boundaries of that. I'm sorry, I don't know. But the next one is Montrose Parkway, then Rock Spring, then East I-270 at Goody, then the Shady Grove Life Science, then Germantown. So the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 most vacant, which are all above the regional average, are what used to be sort of that suburban office park or suburban commercial setting, and now the least vacant are really kind of the more urbanized settings. I don't know that we include Gaithersburg City in
We
these.
have our own
You have your
numbers.
own.
We get reports on this
Yeah,
every couple weeks.
it may mirror this. I don't know.
Actually, we're doing pretty well.
We're
Are
doing
you doing
better,
pretty well?
actually.
Yeah.
Our
Much
economic
higher.
development director's right behind you.
Yeah.
He's nodding his
He
head. We're
says
doing
thumbs
pretty
up.
To the podium.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Good.
it.
I'm glad to hear that. So, I think the kind of overall thing was that the trends have really kind of reversed or inverted from what they used to be, where the urbanized areas in the county were, sort of hollowed out, and people weren't moving there 25 years ago, but now.
But are there any, is there a direction to move towards acquiring these buildings and repurposing them?
So now, as far as acquiring buildings and repurposing them, I think it's a interesting question whether office buildings could be used for schools. I think my kid goes to the only office building in the county that is actually a school today, which is Piney Branch Elementary. And I will tell you, he doesn't have a window in his classroom this year. So, be careful what you wish for, I guess, to some extent. But the Piney Branch Elementary School building used to be a county health department, and it became a school. What we learned from the task force that we had that looked at that issue was that, it could work if the vacant office building is in the same place as the crowding problem, but that generally there was sort of a mismatch between where you have the most people and where you have the empty office buildings. And so it wasn't often very helpful that, there's a vacant building kind of not where you need it. So that was sort of the takeaway from that report, was there's just kind of a mismatch of where we have the empty buildings. But then the observation was also it's not necessarily cheaper, that if you have a vacant school that you're going to reopen, it's probably cheaper to reopen a vacant school than it is, and you have to pay that capital expense to do that, than it is to buy an office building from a commercial owner and then retrofit that office building to a standard that we would all be willing to send our kids to. So it's not cheap. It has been done, I think, in a kind of, but to me it's sort of more of a lightning in a bottle kind of situation. I think generally speaking, when we look at our master plans, we're seeing that, vacant land or former school sites or sites given to us from new development will provide the locations that we need for schools. So we haven't yet felt that it was necessary to try to acquire a vacant office building. But for example, downtown Bethesda, there is Lynbrook Elementary right in East Bethesda that is no longer used as a school, and we could, and we will, I'm quite sure, reopen that as a school. I'm not sure which specific school you're.
Rachel Carson.
Rachel Carson. I'm not sure what the solution is in that immediate area, but what we have seen mostly is that either a school site that's not being used for a school or new land acquired through development is what gets us a more cost-effective solution. But we're not opposed to an office building, and if there's the right one in the right
location
place, that's an option.
Good. Okay. You mentioned the job growth numbers, and I was wondering where those projections were based on, and was it sector specific or region specific? What part of the county you're seeing the growth in?
I sort of apologize. I don't have the most refined job growth projections here. We have sort of a kind of a 30-year look. I do have a chart showing our job growth relative to D.C. and Virginia.
Okay.
And that, it probably won't surprise you, is that we are adding jobs much more slowly than both D.C. and Virginia. Northern Virginia has been so successful in creating this huge dynamic economic region. I think companies are increasingly sort of challenged as to why they would locate anywhere else other than there. They have to have a reason to be here in biotech or near NIH or FDA or in DC because of proximity to the federal government. But otherwise they're sort of saying we might as well just go to Northern Virginia. That's where everybody else is, and that's a real problem for us. And I think if you look at the region, like Metro sort of gets people in and out of the core. It doesn't get you from Gaithersburg to Tyson's all that well. And we need to kind of think about what the long-term shape of this region and development pattern of this region is. I'm very worried about it personally. I see the center of gravity moving so much south that I think people in Montgomery County already endure very, very, very challenging commutes to the job centers in Northern Virginia, and I think it's only going to get worse. And if Amazon, for example, decides not to come to Montgomery County but go to Crystal City, or go to some place in Northern Virginia, as an example, we're going to have to really get serious about what kind of transportation solutions we're going to put in place so that people in Montgomery County can still have access to those jobs.
Thank you. My last question is about widening I-270. I don't know if you've taken a position, or if the council has.
Yeah, we have.
And then how does that affect?
Sure. Well, fortunately, the county council adopted a master plan for 270 back in 2010. So we are still guided by that. And it's a much more, I would say, practical vision of 270's expansion. It involves reversible lanes potentially, hot lanes or HOV. And it doesn't have a lot of widening. It has some widening, but it doesn't have a lot. It does widen from closer to the bridge to Virginia, where we have a lot of right-of-way. We have 300 feet of right-of-way from the spur all the way to Virginia, and so it widens there. But it does not widen the Beltway, for example, where we don't have that right-of-way. So we, at the moment, are just relying upon our previous master plan. we will get from State Highway more information about what they are looking at in December. So we had a discussion at the council a couple weeks ago where we just got updated on all of the considerations that they have, and they're not really kind of leading yet where they're going. But in December, we'll get more from them. Pete Ron will come back to the council in December, and we'll find out more what they have in mind. I think that my own personal view is it's going to have to come back to reality a little bit and come up with a solution that's more affordable if it's going to get built, or else you're going to have $40, $50 tolls, each way. And it's amazing when you think about what tolls at that level. In order for you to take that, the study of Northern Virginia showed that you have to value your time at about $150 per hour to pay the current rate of tolls during rush hour. And so some people can certainly value their time at that level, but a lot of people are saying it's not worth it to me. And so, they're not getting the ridership that they might, or the drivership that they might have expected. So keeping the construction costs down, kind of makes the economics of the whole deal a little bit easier. And so I wouldn't personally be surprised if they don't come in with something a little bit more modest than what they have been talking about, 4 lanes in each direction or whatever. It's pretty. And as far as the Beltway is concerned, it's hard for us to see how you can widen that very much. We just it's a 200-foot right-of-way presently, whereas to Virginia it's 300 feet. And that's a big difference. That means homes, and that means Rock Creek Park and so on. But it would be great to have lanes that go all the way to Virginia so that you can hop on, here in Gaithersburg and get all the way there if you have to in a hurry. We did call upon, the state to keep studying north of 370. We were disappointed that they had sort of decided to stop the first phase at 370. We think they should go all the way to Frederick.
We agree on that.
Yes, sir.
Well, Hans, we thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for making time for me on the agenda. I really appreciate it. It's terrific to see you in your natural setting, and I look forward to seeing you at the county council or on social media soon. So
you bet. Yeah.
Thank you, my friends.
Thank you, Hans.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Okay, we are going to move on to our courtesy review. Ray Rokes is here to lead us in that.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Staff is before you tonight to present a courtesy review for application ASDP 8040-2018 and seeks guidance on how to proceed with this application. The subject property is located in the Kentlands and is zoned MXD mixed-use development. This application comes before you pursuant to Section 24-198C of the City Code, which states that staff shall present the application to council as a courtesy review for amendments to a SDP involving a change of use. Following the courtesy review, the council shall either 1. Deem that the application has a minor effect and therefore direct the Planning Commission to make a final decision, or 2. The council may direct that the amendment be referred to the Planning Commission for further evaluation, public hearing, and recommendation, and then the council shall thereafter approve or disapprove the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Staff would like to note that either way the council decides, the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing following the decision tonight. Staff has tentatively scheduled the public hearing for Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. If I can direct your attention to the monitor, I can show you the exact location of the subject property. On January 1st, 1967, the subject property was annexed into the city along with the rest of Kentlands and Lakelands area. The subject property received schematic development approval on October 20th, 1989. The applicant is requesting that the general use of childcare be added to the shared parking and use chart for the Kent Garden Circle, which is located here behind my subject property bubble, and is located northeast of the Rachel Carson Elementary School. Specifically, at this time, the applicant intends to convert a portion of the existing dance studio to childcare use. Staff has worked with the applicant to ensure that the property meets the required parking counts. The proposed daycare and dance studio share a parking chart along Kent Garden Circle with the neighboring existing daycare. The uses that share the Kent Garden Circle parking area require a total of 50 spaces, and there are 50 there total now. Only the change of use is before you tonight, and no site improvements are included with this application. Based on these factors, staff recommends that the council find the application have a minor impact and direct the Planning Commission to make the final decision.
Thank you, Ray. The staff recommendation makes perfect sense to me. Look forward to hearing what the council has to say.
So, some time ago, someone approached me about a different property and looking to put a daycare use there. And it turned out that it wasn't suitable because of the lack of outdoor play space. So I'm wondering if this particular property, if that's been looked into and that's something that is workable or not workable for this location.
The state regulates that, but we have asked the applicant if they've spoken to the state already, and they've said yes, and that they do have sufficient outdoor space. I think their target is for younger children, so they need less space other than older children. So that's been something in their favor as they're planning it.
Okay, but we have reason to believe that there's sufficient space
Yes.
to actually make this practical?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Well, yeah, and how many children is this intended to
I
serve?
believe it's a maximum of 12 as it's currently done.
And the other, the performing arts studio will be maintained as well as a use?
Yes.
So, you know, I don't have a big problem with this, but it would have been nice to have some better figures than what were included in the package. In fact, that graphic that you showed us, the aerial photo would have been very helpful, just to kind of get a sense of that. But I had the same question about the outdoor play space as well. So
I might have the site plan. Would that help?
Yeah.
Be helpful?
sure, you know, I mean, I think my comment really is that I wish that had been included in the package. We have that. I mean, that's pretty. That's not very readable. It's not very useful at all.
It's not really readable in my copy either, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
well,
I do
it's
understand.
It's not readable on iPad or even the screen. So I think it would have been nice to have some better illustrations
In the future,
to go
I'll
with it. But
definitely do that.
you know, I agree. I think that I don't have a problem with staff recommendation here as well. So.
Maria? Anybody?
Yeah,
Rob?
I trust my colleagues on the Planning Commission to use their discretion for the best uses here. So, no problem with the recommendation.
Okay, we need a motion, no? Okay, someone want to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 4-0. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Next, we have public comments. This is the time with Mayor and Council would like to hear from anybody who'd like to speak on any topic that is not a public hearing topic tonight. We do have one public hearing. It is on Gaithersburg Arts and Monuments Funding Corporation and changing of its scope and its name. So if you're here to speak about that, then we'll just hold on. You're going to get your chance shortly. If you'd like to speak about anything else, we ask that you keep your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. State your name and address or neighborhood for the record. Do we have anybody who'd like to speak this evening? Going once, going twice. Okay, then we will move on to our public hearing. I'll invite Denise Kaiser and Shelley Williams from our cultural events and arts divisions to lead us in this public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor Ashman and council members. We have a PowerPoint presentation to assist in providing information on this public hearing on the ordinance to amend Chapter 6B of the City Code entitled Gaithersburg Arts and Monuments Funding Corporation. The purpose of this ordinance is to expand the organization's scope so that in addition to supporting the arts in Gaithersburg, it can also work to support city parks and recreation. GAMFIC is organized under the authority of Chapter 6B of City Code and its Articles of Incorporation and bylaws, and the first Board of Directors were appointed by resolution in 2004, and in 2006, GAMFIC received its tax-exempt status from the IRS under Section 501c3. And the mission of this organization is to heighten the awareness of and raise funds to support revitalization and arts initiatives within the city of Gaithersburg. And the GAMFIC board members have organized 7 standing volunteer committees or friends of groups working to support city arts programs. And the board members serve as liaisons to those committees and they provide guidance as needed to the fundraising groups. City staff provides assistance and oversight of the committee fundraising activities for select city programs and events. And funding support can come in the form of sponsorship, donations, grants, fundraising events or activities. Generally, fundraising is conducted by the volunteers. It's to benefit the programs that they participate in or otherwise are interested in supporting. Funds raised are generally transferred to the city after an event to help offset the costs of those programs, or they're held until a target goal is reached to the purchase of the program amenity. Since its inception, Gaithersburg Arts and Monuments Funding Corporation, or GAMFIC, has raised funds to benefit the Book Festival, the Gaithersburg Chorus, Public Art, the Arts Barn programs and amenities, the Gaithersburg Community Museum and the Observatory, cultural events such as Summerfest, and the Benjamin Gaither Center. In recent years, it has become apparent that the city's parks and recreation programs would also benefit from the efforts of a nonprofit organization. But rather than create a separate organization, the proposed ordinance to amend Chapter 6B will provide for that expansion so GAMFIC can include parks and recreation, allowing it to take on a broader developmental role for the city. To reflect this change, GAMFIC would become the Gaithersburg Parks, Arts, and Recreation Corporation, or GPARC, and the requirements for an appointment to the Board of Directors would be amended to include 1 or more individuals representing each of the 3 interest areas, and it would eliminate references to committees that might change over the years, thereby providing a greater shelf life for this ordinance. As you can see from this slide, GAMFIC's current structure is very linear. It has 6 or more appointed members on the board and 7 committees or friends of group. And a board member, as I said before, serves as a liaison to each of those committees. The GPARC structure encompasses a newly expanded scope. It would provide for at least 3 appointed board members, and the bylaws that you will review in a subsequent meeting in November, we're recommending a cap of 15 members. This is a number that resulted from extensive research of similar boards, but it's still a number being considered. Under the wing of the GPARC board would be 3 alliances or committees, Parks, Arts, and Recreation, and each alliance will be chaired or co-chaired by appointed board members. The board members will also serve as liaisons to the chairs or the subcommittees or friends of groups. As GAMFIC's current structure is focused solely on the arts, its friends of groups, its current friends of groups, will slide under the Arts Alliance branch of this chart. So the board of directors will continue to have officers serving as chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer, who the board will elect annually, and the functions of the executive director will continue at this time to be performed by city staff. The board members' roles are as advisors, providing expertise and oversight to ensure organizational effectiveness and compliance to all applicable policies and procedures. To build a board that would best serve this expanded mission, staff researched best practices and interviewed executive directors of similar organizations throughout the country. This research led to the development of a set of skills and expertise desired for an effective board. Aside from an active interest in the areas of parks, recreation, and culture, those skill sets include members with expertise in executive leadership, strategic partnerships, nonprofit and financial management, fundraising, communications, legals, and other areas as outlined on the slide before you. The next step has been to identify prospective members of the community with those traits who might be interested in joining GPARC and support of city programs. GAMFIC's board chair, Mary Falik, have recently begun to provide some of these individuals with an overview of this opportunity to determine their interests. And we're happy to report that there is a great deal of interest. The alliances would be chaired by board member and be comprised of both board members and volunteers. Their role is to be activators, to engage and coordinate projects and activities and look for opportunities to leverage the efforts of the fundraising groups and other interested entities. And the friends of groups or the project-based groups are the doers, the people who are passionately and actively involved in specific programs. They organize the fundraisers, participate in making programs or projects happen, and they volunteer their time and efforts for a cause or project they believe in. Their efforts are conducted under a set of guidelines applicable to the circumstances to ensure all requirements of the city, IRS, and others entities that those requirements are adhered to. All funds received by GAMFIC or GPark are deposited in the organization's bank account. Bank statements are mailed to the city's finance department each month and forwarded to the treasurer. The treasurer and city staff keep a record and reconcile accounting of all funds received and expended. Funds received by a nonprofit are almost always designated, so records contain specific information as to the amount, date received, donor's desired use for the funds, and donor information. The treasurer reports to the board at each regular meeting, and an annual finance report is provided to the city's finance director. A summary of the organization's goals and activities is included in the city's strategic plan and quarterly updates. As GPark will expand the scope of this organization's activities, staff is recommending that additionally an annual budget be provided to the city manager. Some of the key benefits of expanding GAMFIC's scope to GPark are that it will organize and leverage efforts to support all three aspects of our department under one umbrella. This will allow for better coordination of development activities and reduce redundancies in the ask for funding support. We could bundle or package programs so we can better offer corporations and foundations comprehensive opportunities to support city programs that meet their philanthropic goals. It would centralize the coordination of development efforts with the city's overall strategic planning activities and formalize fundraising mechanisms for our department. It will expand the avenue for corporations and foundations to support city activities without creating perceived conflicts of interest, and it will offer more opportunities for community influencers to have a positive impact on the city via efforts of GPark. So in summary, the proposed amendment would expand this organization's mission and enable it to continue supporting and growing arts and culture in our community, while also supporting the recreational needs of our residents and the development, preservation, and if desirable, acquisition of parklands. We're happy to answer any questions you may have, and with me tonight, I also have members, or prospective members, who would like to join GPark, and they're here to support their interest in that. Bridget Ryder and Tracy Rouleau are here. Also, Beverly Kowalczyk, who is a member of Gaithersburg Cultural Arts Advisory Committee. She's here to support this. And of course, we have our Department Director, Michelle Potter, and Arts Administrator Shelley Williams to answer any questions. So we respectfully request that you hold the record open until 5 p.m. on October 12th, 2018, with an anticipated policy discussion on November 5th.
Thank you very much. Welcome to all of you. Thank you all for your interest and support in this organization. The move here makes perfect sense to me, and it's a thorough presentation. I don't have any questions. Are there any others at the dais here before we go to public?
I have some questions.
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I remember when you first came, so this is a little of an update about what GPark has in store. So it's good that we're combining the efforts under one umbrella. So there's 7 volunteer committees, and there's going to be 1 board member assigned to each of those from the current committees.
Let me go back to the...
You want to go back to the slide? So currently, GAMFIC on the left has the board of directors, and each of them are assigned to the 7 Friends of Group. The Arts Alliance would replace that, so the current 7 would be in the under the Arts Alliance branch, and then the new ones would be Parks and Recreation. So there would be a board member who would chair each of the alliances, and board members who would be liaisons to all the Friends of Groups. Does that answer your question?
Okay. I think a more detailed flow chart may be more helpful, because I'm trying to see how those committees are going to be identified, because I think one of the slides mentioned you're going to get rid of the titles.
Well, the title, I'm not quite sure of the question, but the Arts Alliance would replace all
It
the current board
says-
members for GAMFIC would become, I'm most likely part of that Arts Alliance. And we're soliciting members for the parks and the recreation alliances. Things that the volunteer committees that may go under, say, the Parks Alliance could have friends of the parks that would want to raise funding to
So
purchase.
it's on the slide before this. It's under update board of director requirements to provide a greater shelf life.
Sorry? Greater shelf.
It was just one slide before the one you
Yeah.
were showing.
Just the one over
That
yeah,
one right there.
right there.
Oh, to eliminate the references, but that's in the Chapter 6B. The board members in that, in Chapter 6B, all were associated with specific committees. So Cultural Arts Advisory Committee had one, the Public Arts Committee had one, the Old Town Advisory Committee. They were just representing those committees on the board.
Okay.
But two of those committees, they've been merged or have changed or altered. So the greater shelf life comes from not calling out the names of those committees to keep the flexibility of shifting the city's mayor and council appointed committees to best serve the needs that have been identified by the council. But members of those committees, the active committees that would be in support of this would still continue. Plus, we would probably have more that are not under the arts umbrellas, that are more under recreation or parks.
I just think it would be helpful to see who the liaisons are going to be on these committees and what committees they're representing when you go to the board, when you go to the board's committees and commissions tab on the website. It's good to know.
I understand. Yeah, on November 5th, we'll bring this back for the policy discussion.
Okay.
Then we will also bring back the Articles of Incorporation, the bylaws, and a resolution appointing those board members. And that information can be included in the packet at that time.
Okay. Okay, I had some more questions. I remember the last time the reference to community influencers was made, and I see that you've recruited some members in this time. So I'm wondering how you went about, or how did this organization go about recruiting members? And
the slide that shows the characteristics that were identified in our study, we have created in our working sessions with the board a prospective board matrix that includes those qualities on one axis and the potential members on the other. And then we have sought leaders in our community or activators or people who had these traits to ask if they would be interested in participating in this. We will also do a lot of public announcements. When this is finalized and you've approved this and the resolution goes before to do this, we will continue building the board, put out calls for board members. We will continue searching to add a really well-rounded skill set, a well-represented community.
okay, because in 2017, Cindy Hines did a survey for the boards, committees, and commissions to look at the diversity of the boards, committees, and commissions, because these all act as advisory committees and they inform the decisions. I mean, they help us make the decisions before the city. And so I just want to make sure that as you're building out this board, I don't see diversity included here as one of the...
It actually is on our board matrix, but it didn't. It's kind of folded into many, many categories there. It became a standalone, and then it became somebody who had that skill set integrated into most of these categories.
Yeah, I just think with the most diverse city, we
Well,
should
just to
prioritize that when we're recruiting for members.
just to clarify, this is not an advisory committee. This is a separate.
It's a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's
but
a separate.
It's for things happening in the city.
It's
So
yeah.
it's
I'm
that
just.
we shouldn't.
I'm not arguing against
Oh.
diversity. All I'm saying is that it's different from the survey that Cindy Hines was at.
But we're recruiting volunteers from some of the committees that serve the city in an advisory capacity. that's where some of the members are already coming from.
I'm not going
as
to argue the
liaison.
point. I'm just going to say it's sort of apples and oranges, but
What is?
this organization that we're talking about forming or evolving from what is currently there is different from an advisory committee for the city. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it doesn't value this separate nonprofit to have diversity as
Will the
well.
board members be appointed by mayor and council, or they be appointed by the board of directors?
By mayor and council.
Okay.
Okay.
So the same considerations that we already give, I think, in terms of appointments and the ideas about outreach to all parts of our community, that's still there. And I think Councilmember Sales is asking for, I think, a more explicit statement about the need for diversity. I think it's there already. Engagement, equity, empowerment would seem to encompass that, but I think in other areas as well, it's there. And I mean, this is a slide presentation. It's not the charter. So for the corporation, so I think that we can certainly. I agree with you. I think we could be pretty explicit about it. So, I didn't mean to interrupt. But.
Yeah, go ahead, Lorianne.
Okay. And then I see that you mentioned recreational needs of residents. Did we survey residents about their, I guess, their recreational priorities or needs, or how did we come up with those
That's been done in
ideas?
both the city survey, and Parks and Recreation Culture has done a survey also, and as we're preparing our master plan element, which will be complete, we think, about the end of this year, at least a draft of it.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions before we go to the public?
I guess the one question I had is, for some of our committees and commissions, we do have a requirement that members be residents. I don't see that as necessary for G Park, right? Is that
No,
correct?
it is not. It's not a requirement, although we certainly would want to identify people that were very committed to our community, either as residents or business owners, or in some way have a stake in
An
our
important relationship and stakeholders within the city, right? Okay,
Correct.
so
Yes.
I just think that's very important, but we certainly don't want to limit ourselves to the talent that's out there. And there are people that don't live in the city that contribute a lot to the culture that we develop here. So I think this makes a lot of sense. It certainly gives us, I think, more flexibility in terms of development, which is another word for fundraising, for the purposes of all the things that we do. So, I can see how things could evolve. The alliances make sense. And we just have to figure out those other friends of how many different organizations we're going to be friends with, or friends of, or how many organizations are going to be friends of organizations. So I like the plan. It's a natural evolution from where we've been to where we're going.
The more friends, the merrier. Go ahead.
So I just have a couple of quick technical questions. So this organization has been designed to raise funds. It's really its primary or sole goal really is to raise funds for these other projects, correct?
That's correct, but it also does provide volunteers, so it's...
Funds and volunteers.
Yes.
And the reason it's a separate nonprofit corporation, just to reiterate what we discussed the last time you brought this to us, is that way any donations are tax deductible because it's a 401c3 charitable organization. I'm just wondering, in terms of the cost of having this as a separate organization, I assume that there's some accounting costs that go with it. There's probably directors and officers insurance I saw in the document. I would imagine the overhead should be pretty low, but is that really the case here?
Yes, it's very low. It's 3%. Well, the director's insurance is less than $1,000.
Okay, great.
That's annually.
Mm-hmm. And do we incur any significant accounting costs or auditing costs that goes along with this, or is it just rolled into what we do as a city?
It's just rolled into what we already do.
All right, that's great then. No further questions.
All right. This is the time when the mayor and council like to hear from anybody in the public who'd like to speak on this topic. We ask that you keep your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. State your name and address or neighborhood for the record. Who would like to be our first speaker?
Oh, come on.
Come on, you're here.
Don't be shy.
Hi, I'm Beverly Kowalczyk, and I'm a longtime member of the Cultural Arts Advisory Committee, and I'm here
Wait,
to
Bev,
offer.
can you state either your address or neighborhood for the record,
Yes,
please?
I live in Quince Orchard Valley, which is in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and I am a non-city resident, but I am a Gaithersburg resident.
Okay.
So I consider myself part of the city anyway. But, I've long supported the programs that Gaithersburg has to offer, and in particular, the Gaithersburg community. It used to be community, now it's Gaithersburg Chorus. But I just think this change will just add to the vibrancy of the programs that we already have going here, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for anybody who's interested. And I certainly agree with your, comment about diversity. So I think this will add more opportunities for those volunteers to come in and sort of help and do their thing. But I think it just adds to the vibrancy of the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
All right, Tracy.
Yeah, I have to get in front of a microphone, if you know me,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
I'm Tracy Rulo. I am a resident of Lakelands. I'm the president of the Muddy Branch Alliance and one of the names that was mentioned earlier. I just wanted to say I was really excited when folks talked to me about this opportunity. Muddy Branch Alliance really does its best to get folks out recreating on our wonderful trails, and we've got some really big events coming up. And I've always sort of wanted to tie what we're doing with sort of broader Gaithersburg efforts, particularly related to culture, particularly related to the arts. I think that, as a lifelong environmentalist, I don't think that you can separate the three. Lorianne, of course, knows how I feel about diversity. I'm a big advocate of that, and that's one of the things I'm focusing on, is to try to actually get the Muddy Branch Executive Board to be more diverse. And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping I'll be able to do here, too. So I'm in support of the ordinance, and thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm looking at you, Bridget.
I know you are. How am I going to be any better than and well-spoken as these ladies? My name is Bridget Lally Ryder. I'm a longtime resident. We live in the Kentlands in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And I was very honored to be asked to consider being a part of this organization. I think one of the things that I enjoyed most about my former role as the executive director of the Kentlands Community Foundation was the ability to expand all of our programs and include so many volunteers. So this allows me to kind of continue that passion. I also happen to be on the Muddy Branch Alliance with Lorianne and Tracy, but I think one of the other things that I really hope to bring to this effort is the outreach and communication. I'm professionally a communication consultant, so I'm pleased to be able to bring those skills to this effort as well. So thank you for your consideration and your time.
All right, thank you. Any other speakers? Not seeing many likely candidates. Let me just get back to the staff recommendation. So staff recommends that we keep the record open until 5 p.m. on October 12th with anticipated policy discussion on November 5th. What's the pleasure of the council?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Fortunately, I will be absent on the 5th, but it will have my full support.
Okay. And I have lost my, oh, here we go. Where is my chapters here? All right. hold on.
Ryan never lost his place.
Yeah, Ryan didn't lose his place, It's
Next is from the mayor and council. Okay. Okay. We're going to start with Councilmember Robert Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While ordinarily I'd have a lot to say because I spoke so much earlier when President Riemer was here, I'll defer the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Mike.
All right, well, happy fall, everyone. It's October 1st. I hope all your children are doing well in school or college, and locally, or in college elsewhere, so, or even locally. So, a few things have happened that a number of us attended. One of the nice things last week was we had a tour and presentation to Maryland Housing Secretary Holt. He made a visit to the Old Town Park Plaza. We kind of reviewed what was happening in Old Town. Staff was able to provide some insight into how the different ways we've leveraged the funds from the state to continue to develop and improve the Old Town community. And it was nice because Secretary Holt talked about some different ideas as well and programs that we might incorporate into our own planning and working with local businesses to continue to improve Old Town. The same night we had the Wells Robertson House family dinner. I was fortunate to be able to attend. A big part of the Wells Robertson House activities is the family atmosphere that it creates and supports those who are in recovery, and so it's always a nice event to be able to sit down for a meal with the residents and staff who make the program such a great success. And then I think it was Thursday, right? We had the principal, counselors, and PTA officers breakfast, appreciation breakfast at the Activity Center at Borough Park. It's always a great event. It's one of my favorite events. We get to meet principals of every school in Gaithersburg or that serves Gaithersburg children. We get to meet the counselors, and we get to meet the PTA officers, usually the PTA president. So the theme this year was mindfulness. So I think we all got a nice little practice on how to center yourself and prepare for the activities and make yourself better, of greater use to the people that you teach or you work with. So it was a great event, as always, and the mayor got a chance to see how well the junior mayor can handle that position, so I think he actually felt a little threatened at the beginning of that session. And then Saturday we had the Wells Robertson House annual recovery picnic at Borough Park, and again, while I wasn't there for the graduation ceremony, I know the mayor presented a number of certificates of graduations of the program. Again, it's a program that saves lives. It's a program that's contributed to, I think, to what we're successful at, what Gaithersburg means to a lot of people. So I want to congratulate all those who did get a graduation certificate this year, and wish them the best on their continuous journey in recovery, because they're always in recovery every day of their lives. And I have a formal announcement. So if you have one of these, something like this, whether it's an Apple or an Android device or anything like that, this is an advisory for a wireless emergency alert system test. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has announced that it will conduct a test of the wireless emergency alert, that's WEA system, on Wednesday, October 3rd at approximately 2:18 p.m. Cell phones and mobile devices across the country that are turned on and within range of an active cell tower will receive a test message accompanied by a loud noise and vibration. The header will read, "Presidential Alert," and the text will say, "This is a test of the National Wireless Emergency Alert System. No action is needed." That's because it's a test. The test is designed to assess the operational readiness of the infrastructure that distributes national emergency messages. More information can be found at www.fema.gov/emergency-alert-test. So that's fair warning. You can set a reminder on your phone to turn it off at 12:15 or 2:15 if you want. So I know a number of people don't care for those alerts, but it's probably going to be very similar to the Amber Alerts or other major storm alerts that we've had before. So be advised, if it was a real emergency, you'd get a different message than the one I just read off.
Thank you. I think it's funny that it says at approximately 2:18 because nothing seems approximate about 2:18. Neil.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to echo what my colleague just said about the meeting with Secretary Holt and the principals, counselors, and PTA. Those were both great events. I was very impressed with Secretary Holt's knowledge of the various programs that his department offers and his willingness to engage in dialogue on how they can help us as a city, and particularly in the Old Town area. I had a good meeting at Transportation Planning Board, the revision of the 25-year plan now called Visualize 2045, where the latest data shows that congestion is only going to be 43% worse instead of 72% worse like we thought a couple years ago. So it's at least moving in the right direction, although it's still directionally not where we want it to be. One data point that I thought was really interesting is that while funding is increasing over the next 25 years for transit, particularly driven by the increase in metro dedicated funding, funding for highways is relatively flat, but the mix of funding is different because it turns out that by virtue of having really done a tremendous job in the last few years of repairing the bridges in the state and in the region, there's much less money going into maintenance going forward that's required and more into expanding the system. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're actually seeing a slight improvement, at least in transportation congestion, or at least a lowering of the rate at which we expect it to get worse, and hopefully better plans are coming forward. Also was invited by a large law firm called Denton's and Kentland's resident Jennifer Morrissey to participate in a Smart Cities Roundtable on Friday, which I thought was interesting. I was expecting to participate and sit in the audience and ask questions and learn, and then they asked me to sit up on the front and participate, where I asked questions and learned, so I guess I got my money's worth out of it, considering it was free. And they came up with some great suggestions, and we had some great input from some members of Exelon in the audience who can solve one of the areas that we've been trying to solve for a while, and figuring out how to pay for more efficient lighting in the streets. And I'll share that information with you, Lynn, later, because I know you've been wrestling with this for quite some time. So there may be some relief coming. No promises yet, but it's a sign of good direction. And just to keep it short, because I have an announcement to make as well, I just want to point out that we had some members of the Muddy Branch Alliance and my colleague here. They're holding an event on the 13th called the Volksmarch around the Metamune and Quince Orchard Park community, and I'll be participating. I know a number of us will be there. I think it should be a lot of fun, and hoping for great weather. So finally, an announcement for you. The Council in the Communities notice to the general public is hereby given that the Gaithersburg Mayor and City Council plans to conduct a Council in the Communities meeting on Wednesday, October 24th at 7 p.m. at Lakelands Park Middle School, 1200 Main Street, Gaithersburg, Maryland. The meeting is being held for residents in and around Darnestown Road, Great Seneca Highway, and Quince Orchard Road, including the Beacon Place, Courts of Devon, and Kentlands Manor Apartments, condominiums, Bizzuto, Colonnade, Copperfield Crossing, Cross Green, Heathwalk Mills, Muse, Main Street, Market Street, Kentlands 1 to 5, trying to read Roman numerals here, Kentlands Craft Star, Kentlands Ridge, Kentlands View, Orchard Ridge, Quince Orchard Park 1 and 2, and the neighborhoods of Kentlands, Lakelands, the Orchards, Quince Orchard Park, vistas at Quince Orchard Park. The Council in the Communities are always great events, and a lot of chance for question and answer and learning what our city does. Please contact Neighborhood Services Division Chief Kevin Roman at 240-805-1042 for more information, or if you need accessibility accommodations.
Thank you, Neil. Lorianne.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. So thank you to our guest this evening, Councilmember Hans Riemer, for coming, and Judith Clark for coming to help us recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This week, last week I attended the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce They held a business networking event in Crown that was very well attended. And they also did a tour of the Universities of Shady Grove's new science and technology building. So that's going to be a really good resource in our neck of the woods. The 13th annual Wells Robertson House picnic. I got there late, but just wanted to again congratulate all of the graduates, the alumni, and the staff, and all of the families of the alumni, the graduates, and current clients for the continued support that those in recovery will need throughout their lives. The Senior Advisory Committee had their monthly meeting this morning, and we visited with we will be visiting other senior centers later this month, and we'll be bringing back some ideas and best practices to adopt here, and also share some of the new things that are happening here in the city. Some upcoming events that I want you to keep in mind. Neil already mentioned the Volks March happening next week. There's also Coffee with a Cop happening on Wednesday in the Kentlands at Panera. And you can find more information online. It's with the 6th District Police Force. Leadership Montgomery Homecoming will be happening this Thursday. If you want to learn more about Leadership Montgomery in the community and meet some of the alumni, it's a great event to see what's going to be happening over the course of the year. And lastly, in addition to Domestic Violence Awareness Month, October is also Breast Cancer Awareness Month, hence the reason I'm wearing pink this evening. And so I just want to remind my colleagues that the major problem of is that breast cancer in men is often diagnosed later than breast cancer in women. For women, you should start getting mammograms as early as 40 years old, so please get checked. And although it's rare for men under 35 to get breast cancer, a man's chance of getting breast cancer goes up with age. So everyone out there, just a friendly reminder to get checked, and remind your friends as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorianne. Next week, our work session, Monday, October 8th, will be to receive an update on the status of the city's adequate public facilities ordinance schools test, and I'm sure that will be a lively discussion. For more information, including the agenda, visit the city's website or contact the city manager's office on 301-258-6310. I'll note that on Sunday, October 14th, we have our enormous, huge, awesome Oktoberfest event in the Kentlands. All of us will be there, surely, and we're going to get great weather, as well as for the Volks March, which is, I believe, the day before. So hopefully we have great weather all weekend that weekend, but Oktoberfest is going to be great. Please join us. And the next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on Monday, October 15th, from the city manager.
Thanks, Mayor. Just one item. As of this afternoon, the city team that has been negotiating with Comcast, which would be myself and the City Attorney Board and Cindy Hines, we did manage to get a draft completed with the local team from Comcast. It's been an interesting kind of counterpoint negotiating the finer points of a local franchise, while at the national level, they're trying to basically just take everything away from us that we have. But we did, I think, craft an agreement that should go smoothly. Our goal is to get through the entire process, the public hearing and the adoption, by the end of the year. So you'll see it a couple more times.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Next, Tom Lonergan, Economic Development Director, to tell us how we're doing in the city.
Thank you, Mayor. We're doing well. And Council President Riemer's discussion about the local economy couldn't have been more timely. My update, albeit brief, does bring some important new update from Maryland's Department of Labor Licensing and Regulations, where we did learn that Gaithersburg continues to outshine most of our municipal counterparts around the state, as we most recently registered an unemployment rate of just 3.4%, second lowest rate among Maryland's reporting cities. That is under Maryland's or Montgomery County's overall average of 3.6% and significantly less than the overall state average of 4.2%. Statewide, the number of advertised jobs did jump dramatically last month from 177,000 in July to just under 200,000 in August. Sharon and I were just preparing some employment data for our finance office, and a few things caught our attention that I thought might be of interest. The city's top 10 employers by job count employed just shy of 10,000 people here in the city, with NIST, MedImmune, and Leidos taking the top 3. Our 10 largest employers combined employ nearly 2,500 more than the top 10 did a decade ago. Our 10 biggest employers are more diverse than they were a decade ago, also representing a range of industries including biotech, healthcare, IT, and management services. And it's nice to point out that 5 out of those 10 in the city have been supported with incentive packages provided by the city. Those include OpenText, Emergent Biosolutions, GeneDx, Sodexo, and Adventist Health. Secondly, and finally, Councilmember Sesma, a couple of weeks ago, you had a couple of questions about some retailers here in the city and have just this much more information about them. Regarding Taco Daddy at 555 Quince Orchard, still immersed in build-out, there is no word yet on an opening date, but I can report that there has been no final use and occupancy permit issued by the city, nor have final inspections been scheduled, which will be required, obviously, and they are not yet listed among Montgomery County's liquor licensees, so we're following it, but we don't have an opening date yet. And secondly, At Home in Kentlands, a renovation permit has been issued. While I haven't been able to confirm this, my understanding is that they're trying to be done with renovations and open by November. No surprise there.
Really? That's
Councilmember Sales, just to answer a question you had earlier, the county's overall office average vacancy is around 10% right now. The city's is 7%, on par with downtown Silver Springs, which is also about that rate.
Very good. One quick question. Did you have any updates on the McDonald's redevelopment, 355, the timeline and what
John?
they are?
Our out of my wheelhouse, but we can look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We will move on to policy discussion and invite Caroline Seiden to talk about Discovery Park. See what the pleasure of the council is going to be.
You want to discover what our
Yes, let's discover our position on Discovery. That felt bad, even just saying that.
It was. Good evening, everyone. This is a policy discussion on Schematic Development Plan SDP 7974 2018, which was submitted by the City of Gaithersburg Department of Public Works on July 3rd, 2018. The application proposes the development of a 14.95-acre city park to further the objective of ensuring resident proximity to parks. The overall project goal was to develop a small, natural-focused walk-to-park to be used for playing, picnicking, and strolling, and the plan proposes a park with walking trails, playground equipment, picnic areas, and gardens. The site is located here in red. It straddles 2 parcels, N600 and N532, right along Orchard Ridge Drive at the intersection of Kentlands, near the intersection with Kentlands Boulevard and Great Seneca Highway, and following around along Orchard Ridge Drive along Quince Orchard Park. The addresses between the 2 parcels is 601 Orchard Ridge Drive, and on July 16th, 2018, the Mayor and City Council approved the name Discovery Park for the subject property. A joint public hearing before the Mayor and Council and the Planning Commission was held on August 20th, 2018. There was one speaker from the public who offered general support for the park, but also expressed concerns about the availability of parking. At its regular meeting on September 5th, 2018, the Planning Commission discussed several aspects of SDP 7974 2018 and voiced their support for the proposed park, noting, however, concerns regarding parking availability and the visibility issues posed by an existing berm. Specifically, the Planning Commission discussed concerns regarding the isolation of the Great Lawn, which I'll get into in a minute, and the Commission determined that the parking and access issues could be revisited in the future if concerns arise, and the Planning Commission recommended approval of SDP 7974-2018 with one condition. The mayor and council record closed on September 24th, 2018. At the time of the record closing, staff had received one additional piece of testimony from Eric Morrison at AstraZeneca. I believe that is exhibit number 29, if I'm not, just want to confirm that. Yep, exhibit 29, regarding the infeasibility of AstraZeneca sharing parking at its daycare facility, which is adjacent to the park right here, because they have additional plans for their parcel, and they'll have demands for that parking lot for themselves. The applicant and design team have not proposed any changes to the park design since the public hearing. And just to review quickly, this is the general proposed design for the park. It provides several small picnic areas, pathways, a small nature play area, and discovery nook that will include elements comprised of rope and climbing structures, an expression swing, a bird's nest swing, a wooden tree-like house with a slide, a butterfly haven, a living willow, simple dome, and a gaga ball pit. Additional site furnishings will include picnic tables, individual picnic shelters, bike rack, trash and recycling receptacles, dog waste station, fencing, signage, and benches along the pathways. And the pathways will be marked with mile markers. The playground protective surfacing will include engineered wood fiber mulch, poured-in-place play surface, and flexible pavement. And the 20,000 square foot great lawn is centrally located right here between the various playgrounds and walking paths. I'll pull up. These are just images of some of the different items that I just listed. During the course of the hearing, the mayor and city council and planning commission discussed various aspects of park design, including the adequacy of parking, potential for additional trails and park entrances, maintenance costs for park plantings and paving, consideration of a dog run, and the challenges posed by the existing berm. Responses to some of those questions posed at the public hearing are included, or the answers to some of those are included as Exhibit 25. I did not plan to go through most of them, but I did want to highlight two of the issues raised. One involves the berm. We'll go back here, along in front of the Great Lawn. As discussed at the joint public hearing, an existing berm along Orchard Ridge Drive poses both challenges and opportunities for the park design. The berm provides separation between the roadway and the park, providing a more secluded setting for the park. However, it also presents access and visibility challenges. Entrances to the park are located on the east and west ends of the park, over here and over here, with no central entrance due to the location of the berm. Staff and the design team are in agreement that preservation of the existing berm and the newly planted trees along the berm here is preferred over cutting into the berm for another park entrance or for another trail. The other issue that was raised was parking. There are no new parking spaces proposed for Discovery Park. There are 36 on-street parking spaces available along Orchard Ridge Drive in the vicinity of the park. Staff believes that there is sufficient parking. It is meant to be a walk-to park, and a pedestrian access to the park is via connections on the existing sidewalks. There are sidewalks on both sides of Orchard Ridge Drive and crosswalks all along the way. Staff has also, I mentioned that we had advised that MedImmune would not be able to share some parking at their Discovery Meadows Child Care Center, so it can't be added there. Staff is supportive of the application and has provided comprehensive findings in the supplemental staff analysis, and there is also a draft resolution of approval should the council wish to take action this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. You want to start?
Well, I just had a quick question. When you talked about the berm, I'm just thinking if I'm parking along that half circle, I'd probably be more inclined to just walk right up that. walkway
Well, it's
through it.
Through here?
Yeah.
It's
And
a
so-
fairly significant elevation to do that, so
It'd be tough.
you might not be so. It looks flat on the screen, but it's actually not in person.
And there's
It would be
no
too-
way to put maybe a few stepping stones there to
Yeah, the
accommodate
elevation change is fairly
okay.
significant. I mean, you have to really cut into it.
So you're cutting into the side ones that are displayed.
It
that
flattens
used to-
out. The
berm
berm flattens
isn't
out. I don't know if you can see, there are some grade, and it's very light in white. There are some grading lines, and you can see how the elevation moves up and then flattens out as you go from side to side. But you'd have to do a significant amount of work to
Make
put
it.
a cut in there.
Okay. That was my
Anyone
question
else?
for now.
So I guess the last question, the only real question I had, and I guess we should have asked this last time you were here, are there plans for a running water fountain or a bathroom facility at all in this park?
I do not believe so.
Yeah, that would be the only thing that would make me, I think that's the only thing that might be needed, but other than that, I think, I really like the plan. I think this is, be a special place.
Rob?
Just on the berm, what's the plan for maintenance of it? Is it going to be an active space, shortcut grass, or is it going to be passive, allow it to grow?
I don't know if Michelle can answer that better than I can.
So the topography of the berm is sort of flat, an elevation, and then flat again. So that's why there's the two entrances on either side of it, because you could just walk around it right now. And it is currently mowed, and it will continue to be mowed, except there are tree plantings that were done approximately 5 years ago through a grant that we got through the Department of Natural Resources.
Maybe, so for the trees on the top of the berm, I agree with preserving them, but what about perhaps if you want to activate the space, do a nature trail? So instead of a hard paved trail that needs to be maintained, a trail on top with natural surface, porous.
Yeah, the park designers did not want to touch the berm, but it's something that probably they
Can
could
come in after the fact.
look into if there was some interest in it. I think the path along here was chosen behind the berm instead of doing something on top of the berm.
Yeah, the berm's kind of an odd feature. Maybe an interesting feature once it's built out, but thinking of ways to activate it or.
It's really
Well,
tall.
it's-
The height I mean, it's really kind
Well, yeah,
of
but it
high.
looks like there's flat on both sides that crests to a flat area on top, and then obviously you steer clear of the edge because you may roll out into Orchard Ridge Drive, but just.
Yeah, I think there was also some effort in the park design to make sure that the entire park was ADA accessible, and that may have played into the inability to get the grades to put a trail on
Well, that's
top
why
of there.
that's why we asked about a cut.
Cutting, yeah.
You know, where you could have a path.
You could cut into it.
I think once the park is used, I'm sorry, were you done? Once the park is used, I think you'll find some natural paths that people make because they don't always walk on a trail or a walkway, and so you'll find some, we'll see where people walk through the park.
Naturally, yeah.
And naturally create places where, they'll create their own nature trails.
Okay. All right, well, we have a resolution before us. What's the pleasure of the council?
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 4-0. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, we have a new park.
Yes.
It actually still needs to go back to the planning commission.
Oh, all right, well.
We're close.
Do you think they'll agree with us?
Yeah, well,
All right. Thanks, Caroline. Okay, Greg Mann is here to talk to us about asking for staff guidance.
Yes, good evening. Staff's before you tonight requesting the Mayor and City Council announce the closing of the record for Schematic Development Plan application SDP-7362-2016. As a reminder, the applicant is requesting approval to construct a new multi-family apartment building at 1913 and 1917 Quince Orchard Road. The joint public hearing for this application was held on February 6, 2017. During the hearing, multiple questions were raised and the record was held open indefinitely. Since that time, the application has gone through 3 work sessions. Those dates were March 27th, 2017, July 10th, 2017, and January 22nd, 2018. During those work sessions, the City Council and Planning Commission had questions about the ingress-egress safety along Great Seneca Highway and wanted the applicant to continue to work with the residents within the Colonnade community. The applicant has submitted revised plans, which include a vehicle weaving analysis for Great Seneca Highway and support for the project from the Colonnade in the form of a signed MOU. The updated index memorandum and exhibits are available on the project page on the city website. Staff is of the opinion the applicant has responded to all the questions raised by the City Council and Planning Commission, and staff recommends the Mayor and City Council make a motion to announce the closing of the record for 5 p.m. October 26, 2018, with anticipated policy discussion on November 19th, 2018.
Okay, thank you, Greg. I'm going to leave this to council, but I would like to make a request of staff that as you put together background material for our packages, that rather than just make reference to additional materials that we could find by going elsewhere, I'd like it all to be in the package. So as long as we can get an agreement on that, I'd rather not have to go to several places in order to consider things. But I realize we're not voting on this project tonight, where this is just about closing the record. So I'd like to hear from the council. Who'd like to go first?
Well, I'd like to piggyback on the plans, in addition to the comments from the public that were submitted previously, and then the ones, I'm sure we're going to get the ones that are going to be for this current one, but if we can also have the prior comments from the public included as well.
That will certainly be part of the full package we get for policy discussion, certainly.
Well, I know it'll have the current ones, but I don't know if it'll have the past ones before they did the updated designs.
It should.
Okay.
It should. But yeah, good point. Neil.
So I'd be very curious to understand what's in the agreement between the Colonnade and the apartment developer. I don't know if we're entitled to see that information.
It is actually included as an exhibit.
It's an exhibit?
Mm-hmm.
All right,
it
great.
is included in the packet.
Okay, I think that's important to understand.
Yeah, I was glad to see the MOU between the Colonnade Board and the developer, the applicant. It seems to have addressed many of the concerns of the Colonnade residents that we'd heard about. So I think that's an important aspect of this. This is still not a project that I'm very enthusiastic about for a variety of reasons. I still have a problem, even though we have assurances from SHA that the right-in, right-out on Great Seneca is viable and safe. I don't agree. I think the reality of how people drive and the fact that Great Seneca Highway is a highway and people drive on it like a highway, I think having that right-in, right-out there within, probably 250 feet or less from the intersection is problematic. It's a turn lane, it's a merge lane, from traffic coming down Great Seneca, going to Main Street on Kentland. So I'm still concerned about that safety. I wasn't particularly impressed with the analysis by the traffic group on how traffic will weave through the project. I think the agreement with the Colonnade certainly addresses that issue, but there's still many aspects of this project that I have problems with. So, but I think the applicants responded to all of our questions. I'll agree with that. I'm not particularly impressed with those responses and how that changes my perception of this project. So.
Okay. Anyone else? Again, this is just about closing the record.
Yeah, so it looks like there's one mayor and council session between now and closing of the record. Just encourage staff to do maximum outreach. I'm sure there are folks that you know to contact and you will contact them. Just want to emphasize that point.
Okay, so
And do it prior to that
we need
session.
we need a motion to hold the record open until October. Make sure I'm looking at the right one.
October 26th.
with anticipated policy discussion on November 19th.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to move to keep the record open until 5 p.m. on October 26th, with anticipated policy discussion on November 19th, 2018.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, I'll oppose that.
Okay. All right. So
the
it's-
votes pass it. So
Okay, so we have a 3-1 to close close the record on October 26th. Thank you very much, Greg.
thank you, Greg.
From the city attorney.
I just wanted to provide a quick update on the small cell issue. I think it's a little timely from some of the discussion earlier this evening. There are a number of issues going on both the federal, state, and also on the local level. As you all know, the feds, the FCC, issued their order last week. Staff is analyzing the order, and I think as Councilmember Riemer said, we are looking at potential litigation. I think that was the reason Dennis and I were running a little bit late coming down here tonight. We're on a conference call, so there'll be more coming on that in the very near future because any appeal will probably need to be filed this month. On the state level, there is another meeting with MML and MACO and the small cell industry tomorrow to talk about the statewide bill, which I will be attending that as well. Obviously, that's been impacted by the FCC order as well. In addition, tomorrow we have another meeting with Crown Castle to continue the negotiations for a local franchise agreement. So there are a lot of moving parts in the small cell, and we will keep you updated.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, does the state bill have a sponsor yet in the House or the Senate?
I do not believe so. I think they're waiting until after the election.
Good point.
Yes.
Good point. Well, okay.
Okay. Anything from any other staff? Okay, not seeing anything. Again, join us next week for our work session on the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance Schools Test. Join us October 14th for Oktoberfest, and as well as all the other dates and all the other events that we named before. And we'll see you, next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council is on October 15th. Until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.